And when I met with this student, he called himself dumb. He was never going to be able to do anything. He certainly was never going to get a job because he was too stupid. I mean, these are things coming out of his mouth.
Mm.
Um, and what I found when I went to that first meeting was they gave up on him.
Mm.
They gave up on him. He was one that if I could get from an F to a D, I was happy because literally his grades were at a 20%. So that's a 40% gap
Mm.
that we were trying to close. And it was so heartrending for him because he got up to 40%. And I'm like, you're doing great. We got you up 20%, but I'm still failing. I know. We'll get to that. But let's just keep progressing.
Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together, we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you as a foster and adoptive family raise kids from hard places. You're ready, I'm ready. Let's get this party started. Hello, and welcome to Season 5 of Book Therapy. This is now a video podcast, guys. We are on YouTube. We are doing video as well as audio. So if you need the link, it is below. And I hope you enjoy. We have a fantastic guest today to kick off the season. But before we get to that, I wanted to say thank you to our sponsor for the fall, JDE Creations. JDE Creations is based in Michigan. They do creative and inspiring wood wall art and design. They have been on Etsy for 11 years, and they have 1,600 sales. They do amazing woodworking, all handmade, trees, flowers, hanging art, huge art, custom pieces, anything you could want. Just use the code BOOKTHERAPY and you'll get a discount. I can't wait for you guys to see what is up and coming. We have amazing guests, as always. I've had the chance to interview incredible authors, and they have poured their hearts and souls into their books, and it's a privilege just to talk with them. So I'm excited for you guys to hear everything that we have planned. I have most of the fall episodes all recorded and booked, and it's going to be amazing. And there's just more good stuff to come. So thank you for being here. On with the show. Let's dive into the book. Today we are talking about From Placement to Graduation and Beyond, How to Navigate Education and Foster Care, The Path Forward by Sharon Dunlevy. And she is a smart lady. She's got a master's, doctorate. Thank you for joining me here today, Sharon.
Thanks for having me, Kim.
We are going to talk about some of the hardest things involving foster children, and it's their education.
Yeah.
We know that children in the foster care system have these deficits. They come into the home, they have been moved around, they have been displaced from their family. So not only are they dealing with the physical challenges of being away from their family in a new home, in a new environment, possibly for the 5th or 6th or 10th time, but they have to set aside their personal feelings and step into a classroom. And school is hard for kids just growing up, but kids who are dealing with the inner turmoil and the trauma of their life and the confusion and the chaos, school can be really, really, really hard. And I have seen this firsthand. I know you have. So we're going to talk today about how we help those kids through the education process. And I want to go ahead and jump in with challenges and specific tips for that transition to a new school. So we're thinking about kids who have been in different places. The foster parents are navigating, okay, we have a new placement. Let's get them in school. Talk to me about what that looks like and why early intervention is important, and just building that solid foundation of getting the kid off on a good start.
Sure. So first, Kim, what I want to talk about that is when a child changes homes, there is a new law that went into effect in 2016 that actually will allow them to stay in their current school, even if the foster parent is out of district. So they don't always have to change schools, but there are quite a few that do for various reasons. Maybe it's a short-term stay or a longer-term stay. Maybe they're pre-adoptive, and it does make sense for them to change schools. So, a couple of things that I like to coach my foster parents on is to think through who's going to enroll them. Sometimes we make assumptions and we assume the case manager is going to enroll the student, or the case manager is assuming the foster parent is going to enroll the student. So, what I always tell my foster parents is never make an assumption. Ask that question first. Who's enrolling the kid? Because if we're waiting for the other person to do it, then we're waiting. The other thing to know is when a foster kid does need to change schools, schools can no longer hold up their enrollment because they're missing paperwork. In the past, anybody who has fostered in the past will know this, but in the past, if you did not have your students' medical records, shot records, birth certificate, all these things, they couldn't enroll in school. Well, then what was happening is these kids were missing class time. And that's what happens with foster kids anyways. They miss class time because of court dates. They have therapy. They have what other meetings that they have to have. And so they're already missing class time. And then if they're missing more class time because they can't get enrolled in school, they're just going to fall further and further behind. So don't make assumptions. Figure out who's going to enroll them. If the school tries to hold you up and say, no, you can't enroll your student now because we don't have this record, this record, this record, then you say, based on the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2016, my child can be enrolled and start school today without those records. And that's another important point. And the day that they enroll, they're allowed to attend school. There is no waiting period. And
Wow.
so that really makes a difference when the foster parents know that, because they don't always know that. And that's why I wrote this book, right? Was there are a lot of things that foster parents don't know are laws that they can use to help the kids get into a classroom, which is what we really want.
And are these rules state specific, or I'm assuming that one you just mentioned is nationwide?
Yes, the Every Student Succeeds Act is a federal law, and it is applied the same in every state. So yeah, there's no wavering on that. So,
At the beginning of the book, you scare me with the statistics, and I don't know that everybody realizes what the statistics are in regards to education with kids in
yeah.
foster care. And one of them is 29% do not graduate from high school. Less than 10% will ever earn a college degree.
Mhm.
1 in 5 will struggle with long-term mental health issues, and 20 to 40% will have their own children enter the child welfare system.
Mhm.
One person I really respect is Tori Hope Peterson, and we just recently talked about her book, Fostered, and it's her memoir of growing up in the foster care system. She entered early on and then again as a teenager, and she aged out, but she was in from 12 to 18 years old. And she knew the statistics, and it's heartbreaking because she struggled for years, but she did graduate from high school, and then she went on to graduate from college as well. So, as we're thinking about these kids, give me an example of someone in your life or someone that you've watched go through this journey of getting a child into an education system.
So, I have a really good story that I like to share about this, and I call this student Jim. That's obviously not his name, but I call him Jim. Jim came to the licensing agency that I was working with out of residential. He had been in residential since he was little, and he went all the way through ninth grade, and came out of residential and was going to enter school, high school, for the first time with a foster family. Jim was placed with one of what I consider our best foster families. They had been doing this for years separately. They were both on their second marriage. Before they married, they both had done foster kids. He had done foster boys. She had done foster girl teens like you, Kim, though she specifically took teen mothers, because that was a very specific niche that a lot of people just didn't want to deal with. And she was so good with them. So when they married, they decided to focus more on the boys. And so they would take teen boys. Jim went to live with them. And very interesting dynamic because they were African American and he was white. And so that was kind of a different thing for him coming out of residential. There were a lot of challenges, obviously. New family, having some behaviors that were carryovers from residential. If you know anything about residential, those are the high behavior risk kids. And usually it's not a very good environment because you put all those high behaviors together. Well, of course, they're going to behave even worse.
Yes.
So he came out of residential and he had this horrible, individualized education plan, IEP, that was like, he's violent, he's angry, all these things. The school didn't want to take him, but they knew this foster family really well. These foster parents had been fostering for a long time, had always sent their kids to this school. So we got in, we talked with them, said, yeah, this is not how Jim really is. This is what we see. Got him enrolled. And he was partway through his 10th grade year and they were still trying to get his records from the residential center, and come to find out they never recorded his 9th grade classes.
Oh,
So
no.
he had no 9th grade credits at all.
Oh, no.
So we're partway through his 10th grade year and we're like, okay, now we have to catch up. So he was doing his 10th grade classes and then coming home and doing his 9th grade classes on the computer with his foster family or me. I was his tutor as well, as not just his educational advocate at that time. So we're going through all of this with him. And of course, he's mad because he's behind, and it wasn't fair. But what made the difference, I think, for him compared to some of the other students I worked with was those foster parents. They, especially the foster dad, was so invested in Jim succeeding. And he had done this long enough that he knew how to do it without pushing, right? Because if you're a teen and we push, what are they going to do? They're going to do the thing that you
Bite
don't
your
want
head
them
off.
to do. Yeah. Or they're going to resist, right? And so his foster dad was just really good about kind of helping him, encouraging him, saying, yes, things are bad. Yes, it's not fair, but you have a chance to do better. And so we all together got him graduated only a semester late, which I'm very proud of. I will say there was a moment like 2 weeks before graduation where I really thought he was going to quit and step away. He was so frustrated. The math teacher was not working with us. There were all those challenges that are real. These things happen. But we got him settled, we got him graduated, and in Indiana, where I live, they have an extended foster care program where they can stay in the system with some supports, but also live independently. And he took full advantage of that, right? And and again, I credit the foster family with that because they talked to him about it, helped him understand that at 18, he may not be ready to live on his own. And all these supports are available if he took advantage of them. And so that's he's my success story because we got him graduated. He's got a pretty good job now. I know he's been a manager at a pizza place for a while. I think he's moved on to another place, but he's also a manager there. So, he's doing really well. But it really took some deliberate work on the part of the foster parents. Like, not only were we working with him, but that foster family attended every school meeting. They asked for school meetings when we felt like things were not being, like his IEP was not being implemented correctly. He wasn't getting the supports he needed, all of those things. We really worked with them and helped him have some confidence. We helped teach him how to self-advocate. That made a difference too. When he could walk into the classroom and say, hey, I know my IEP says this, and you're not doing that. And then so those were just all those little things that we had to help teach him. Now, does that work with every kid? I will say Jim is very resilient. I had other kids I worked with that it was a little harder, but for the most part, I was able to get my kids to graduate one way or another. Either I worked with them and got them a tutor and we would work one-on-one, or I did have a couple of kids that school was not for them. So we made a conscious decision to move the GED route. A lot of people don't know, but Goodwill Enterprises hosts what's called Excel centers. And those are for adult learners who have not gotten their high school degree. They can go to one of these Excel centers and they will get their GED, and they work as a group. There's a group of them that work together to complete their GED, so they're not doing it on their own. I'm a huge supporter of Goodwill because of that. I had kids go to Job Corps. Now, unfortunately, under this new budget, Job Corps has been cut. Kills me. But it was a really good way of getting kids into vocational programs. And that's the other thing we would do, is sometimes we would have to get them into a vocational program rather than an educational program. And those are all options for foster kids if we know the right way to do it.
You really have to know what they need and what their strengths are. It's hard because you're saying that some of these kids are resilient and some of them, they do get overcome by those challenges and aren't able to bounce back as quick. And it's maybe later they're going to be able to turn things around. But depending on what age they are and when they went through the trauma, it's tricky. Yeah. I love that you talked about the foster dad being really intentional and patient. And I can just picture him like sitting at the kitchen table, working with Jim, because the foster kids need as many positive role models in their life as possible. Yes. And I'm so thankful that they have you, because foster parents don't necessarily have that education mind. I am certainly not education minded. My favorite topics and subjects in school are reading and writing and recess.
Yes.
And unless it's that, and Spanish. But I mean, I enjoyed school, but I am not your education honcho. Like, don't come to me for explanation on how to solve for X. I was on the floor with some teenagers doing math problems. And it was a game, because she's like, okay, Miss Kim, I'm going to give you this problem and see if you can solve it before me. And I'm like, I don't think I got the right answer. And then she would like explain it to me like, no, that is not how you do it. And I'm like, I'm old. This is above my pay grade. But it was fun. And we had fun with it.
Yeah.
And then I think after we were doing math problems, we were trying to decipher like the text messaging abbreviations, like BRB, G to G. And I went back to like my 90s, 2000s, like AOL Instant Messenger. And I was like, oh, do you guys know what this one is? And they were like, what? And they knew some of them, but that was just, connecting with my teen girls. But it started with doing math on the floor as a competition.
Yeah. Those connections are really what make the difference. So for everything that I did with these kids, I was able to connect with them. And I really took that seriously, because my boss at the licensing agency, well, boss's boss, really, she wanted every kid to what she called catch up. And that wasn't realistic, right? Trauma affects the brain, not just mentally and emotionally and socially, it affects it physically. Trauma shrinks the brain. And so these kids are not the age that they are chronologically. They are mentally more immature. And so we have to deal with them in that way. And that's really difficult. I mean, for a classroom of kids, these poor teachers, right? They've got 30 kids. They've got all these different things. So it's really important as the foster parent to be able to make those connections and to help make learning fun in ways. And I know you want to touch on how to do that at home later, and we'll do that. But I do want to bring up that the concern I have, and the reason I wrote this book, is a lot of states don't focus on the educational needs of children in foster care. I was trained as a special ed teacher, and then when I was trying to kind of transition to a new job, I just happened upon this educational advocate job. And it was a perfect fit, but I didn't know hardly anything about the foster care world. Like, I had a lot of learning to do, and listening to the kids and listening to the foster parents. And what I learned was that they're so busy trying to deal with the trauma and the behaviors that school becomes very secondary. And in the kids' minds, school is secondary. Like they're just trying to survive. They don't know if that foster family is going to be with them permanently. They don't know what's going on with mom and dad. You know, there's a lot going on in their heads and they're just trying to survive. And then you want them to do well in school. If I could get a kid from a F to a D, that's passing. I'm sorry, that's okay. You know? That's good enough because that kid may not even need that class. Like you're talking about the math. I was very well aware that I am not a math person. So I always got a different tutor for the math stuff. And my kids would even joke with me if I was their tutor and they'd be like, oh, this is a math homework. You don't need to do that with me. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need to do that with you. We'll find you somebody else to do the math with.
I would also pass them to my husband because he would do math with them. I want to transition to the second point, which is the big meetings, because you're talking a lot about advocating. And I think it can be intimidating for a foster mom, especially who's not well-versed in the education pieces, to walk into a boardroom where there's, you know, educators who have been doing this a while and advocating for their child in their home who they don't even know very well. And you have a file with an IEP, like you said, that is not always accurate.
Yeah.
And Tori Hope Peterson touched on that too. Her file went before her. And so she would go into a new foster home and it may list behaviors that were either not true or outdated. And it wouldn't list her strengths. It wouldn't list her positive qualities that made her so special. And that was very defeating for her emotionally to come into a place and all these people have already judged her. So we have these foster parents going into a room and in some cases, all these people have already judged the foster child and maybe the foster parents because they've had their own experiences. So how important are these IEPs? And tell me a story or give me an example of what advocating for our children in foster care looks like.
Sure. So when I started as the educational advocate, I would always ask for past IEPs before the very first IEP meeting that I would have with one of my new students. I had a middle schooler whose last 3 IEPs had the very same goals over and over and over again. And when I met with this student, he called himself dumb. He was never going to be able to do anything. He certainly was never going to get a job because he was too stupid. I mean, these are things coming out of his mouth. And what I found when I went to that first meeting was they gave up on him. They gave up on him. He was one that if I could get from an F to a D, I was happy because literally his grades were at a 20%. And D is 60%. And so that's a 40% gap that we were trying to close. And it was so heartrending for him because he was like, he got up to 40%. And I'm like, you're doing great. We got you up 20%, but I'm still failing. I know. We'll get to that. But let's just keep progressing.
Oh, I love that.
Right. And they gave up on him. They weren't challenging him with goals that were appropriate. They just were. It was just, the meetings were kind of, and I will say his foster mom was not very intentional. She had done this a long time. She was tired. I understand. I understand. And she really didn't know. Like, she's been doing this for a long time and the rules had changed and she didn't know that. But really, so what we had to do was, one, we had to kind of get a sense from the school. Well, what do you think he can do? What do you think he's good at? And I will say the way that they write IEPs has changed quite a bit from when Tori was in school. They do start with strengths now, which I think is really important. And they do try and focus on those strengths more. The problem is when we have a school system like ours in the US that teaches to the test, it's really hard to focus on strengths. The nice thing about an IEP is that we can be a little more individualized. So we were able to get him into more classes that were project-based, where he could use his hands and do things. Because this kid was not dumb. Yes, he could not read very well. Yes, he could not translate what he was learning into the paper. but he could sit back behind me in the office and hack into the locked caseworker computer in 2 seconds every time he came into the office.
Oh my
I
God.
was not a dumb kid, right? But his skills were not aligned with the schools. That's why I love vocational programs. Somebody like him, that's where he needed to go in high school. And that's what we did. We got him into a vocational program in high school. Because we started talking about, this is what he's good at. This is how he's feeling. The other thing we started to do was we started bringing him into the IEP meeting so he could talk for himself. We did not make him stay through the entire meeting. That was going to be too overwhelming for him. But we would bring him in the beginning and we would have him tell us, what is it you want to do? What do you see yourself doing as an adult? Do we think we could get you there? What kind of classes might help you? And that made a huge difference. So making sure that their voice is heard. And the other thing I always tell my foster parents is, remember, we're all part of a team. As a foster parent, you have a lot of people that come into your house, right?
Mhm.
You have caseworkers. Sometimes you have therapists coming in. You got all these people. And so remembering that we're all part of a team and that the kid's at the center of the team, that is really important. If we can constantly remind ourselves of that, it makes a big difference. So we could always, if the meetings start to get a little contentious, we can always bring that back around to, but what's best for Jim is, and really take that collaborative tone. The other thing foster parents can do is make sure you make contact with the school as soon as that kid's placed in your home. Make a meeting with the teacher or the principal if it's like a middle school or a high school and they're changing rooms all the time. Don't try and talk to them at drop off or pick up. Make a meeting and sit down with them and say, I've got this new foster kid. This is what I know. This is what I've seen in terms of behaviors. I know their IEP says this, but I haven't seen that behavior. Really making them a person, right? And if you can communicate early before problems happen,
Mhm.
then you already have a relationship. And it's so much easier then to go into those meetings because you've already started that relationship.
So it's important for the foster parents to advocate, but it's also to teach or give the opportunity for the child themselves or the teenager to come into the meetings and self-advocate. And I like how
Mhm.
you talked about their voice,
Yeah.
because a lot of kids in the system have had decisions made for them their whole life, and so they don't feel like they have a voice or that
Yeah.
people don't care about what
Yeah.
they want or need.
Yeah.
And also just that team and collaborative mindset. That is a shift because we are
Mhm.
so defensive
Yeah.
and we are just
Yep.
so prideful that we think
Yep.
we know. And
Mhm.
it really takes an air of humility to say, you know what? I appreciate this teacher.
Yeah.
I appreciate this education advisor. I appreciate the front office staff because
Mhm.
everybody has a part in
Yeah.
bringing this child to the next step in their life, even if it is just from an F to a D.
Yeah.
I can't do that by myself. I don't want to do it by myself. Therefore, I have to make myself less so that I can put the child first and respect
Mhm.
the other adults in their life. And I mean, we know that, we know we're supposed to respect other adults, but at the same
Mhm.
time, it really is an active decision you have to make often.
We have our own trauma triggers and we're not aware of those triggers. We'll be in a meeting and something said or done that pushes a button. And so it's a lot of self-work to know our own triggers so that when we get into a meeting, we're not allowing those triggers to overcome us.
Oh gosh.
Lots of deep breaths, lots of reminding ourselves, this is about the child, this is about the child, this isn't about me. Lots of not taking things personally, that we say that all the time to foster parents.
Mm.
Don't take it personally. The kid doesn't mean what they're saying to you. The school doesn't mean what they're saying to you. And we have to remember that the other people on the other side are also human and they have their own trauma triggers. We don't know what's going on in everybody's head. We don't know what happened in their past. Focusing on that kid is so important, but it's so hard.
It is hard. It is hard, but I'm hearing what you're saying, and it's reminded me of, some of the things that I do want to work on as a foster mom. Self-awareness
Yeah.
is just the first step. And I
Yeah.
like to joke around and say, like, yeah, I'm very self-aware. It doesn't mean I'm doing anything about it, but I'm very self-aware of what my problems are and what my issues are. Um, and recently just hearing about trauma triggers, and I think someone else reminded me, like, hey, when that person said that, when that foster kid pushed you to your limit, they did that on purpose because they know that gets you. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
what am I supposed to do about it? Of course it gets me. And they're like, well, there you go. So I'm self-aware, but there's a lot to learn there. And there's a lot
Mhm.
of intentional work that I think I'm right at the beginning of doing some of that work. Thank you for reminding me that it really is a team effort and we can respect those in the child's life. Thank you for listening to another episode of Book Therapy. For all the details about the author, the book, and what we talked about today, please see the show notes. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, please leave us an honest review on Spotify or Apple. This helps get the word out. And even better, if you know of a foster adoptive family and you think this episode will encourage them, go ahead and send them a text, because not only will it brighten their day, but it will give them another resource, another tool as they are doing the hard work of loving and serving vulnerable children. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We will see you next time.